What would you do if you captured something that shouldn't exist? And I don't mean maybe captured. I mean restrained with steel cables, looking you in the eyes, trying to communicate, kind of captured. Tyler Davis faced that choice in the fall of 2019. And the decision? It cost him everything he thought he knew about these mountains. Look, I know what you're thinking. Another Bigfoot story, right? Some grainy photo, some questionable footprint cast, some drunk guy swearing he saw something big and hairy near his campsite. Yeah, I get it. I was skeptical too, until I got my hands on the actual documentation from this case. The photos, the ranger reports, the witness statements that got buried so deep you'd need a damn excavator to find them. Tyler Davis wasn't some random hiker with a smartphone. The guy spent 15 years as a park ranger in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. He'd tracked black bears through winter storms, rappelled down cliff faces to rescue stranded hikers, faced down armed poachers in the dead of night. This was a man who knew these mountains better than he knew his own reflection, and what he captured in October 2019. It's the kind of thing that makes you question everything. But before we get into the nightmare fuel, here's what I need from you. If this story gets your heart racing, if you find yourself looking over your shoulder wondering what else might be out there, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I dig into cases like this every week, the ones that make authorities uncomfortable, the ones that get filed under unexplained and then conveniently forgotten. Because here's the thing, the truth doesn't disappear just because people refuse to look at it. Alright, you ready for this? Because once you hear what happened to Tyler Davis and his team, you're not going to look at those peaceful forest hiking trails the same way again. October in the Appalachians. That's when this whole thing started. Tyler Davis stood at the edge of the Pine Ridge Ranger Station, staring at the shredded backpack in his hands. 3 parallel gashes, each about an inch wide, ran from the top of the pack straight down to the bottom. Whatever made those cuts had torn through reinforced nylon like it was tissue paper. The thing about catching a creature that shouldn't exist is that nobody teaches you how to do it in ranger training. Tyler was about to learn that lesson the hard way. "You really think this was a bear?" Madison Harris asked, examining the backpack under the station's fluorescent lights. Madison was the station's best tracker. Could follow a deer trail through a thunderstorm, they said. Right now, she looked doubtful as hell. Tyler turned the pack over in his hands. "That's what I'm supposed to write in the report. But look at the spacing on these marks. Too wide for black bear claws. And bears don't usually make parallel cuts this clean." The pack belonged to Ashley Martinez, a nature photographer from Atlanta who'd stumbled into their station that Tuesday morning, looking like she'd seen death itself. Her hands had been shaking so bad she couldn't hold the coffee they'd offered her. "Something followed me," she'd whispered, staring at nothing. "From Miller's Gulch, all the way to the main trail. I could hear it breathing behind me, but every time I turned around, nothing was there." Then she described the sound. Said it was like a freight train mixed with a dying elk, echoing through the forest at dawn. "She get any photos?" Madison asked. 1. Tyler pulled up the image on his phone. Blurry as hell, but you can see something moving between the trees. Too tall to be a bear, too broad to be human. Madison leaned closer, squinting at the screen. The image showed something massive and dark, partially obscured by tree trunks. The proportions were wrong. All wrong. "Could be a moose," she offered, but her tone said she didn't believe it. "In North Carolina? Come on." "Yeah, I know. Just trying to think of anything that makes sense." Thing is, nothing about this made sense. And it was about to get worse. 2 days after Ashley's incident, the Williams family never made it back from their camping trip to Devil's Backbone Ridge. Tyler led the search team that found their campsite, and what he saw there still woke him up at night sometimes. The tent was shredded. Not torn down, shredded. Like something had taken anger out on it with purpose. Sleeping bags were scattered across 50 yards of forest floor, hanging from branches, draped over rocks. Miguel Williams' hiking boot hung from a tree branch 12 feet off the ground. Tyler stood under that boot, staring up at it. No human being could have thrown that up there. Bear? One of the newer rangers suggested. "You ever see a bear throw things?" Madison asked. "Not unkindly. They knock stuff over. Sure, scatter it around. But this?" She gestured at the destroyed campsite. "This is rage. Or a warning. Maybe both." They found the Williams family 3 hours later, 2 miles from their campsite, scared out of their minds but physically unharmed. Miguel kept saying the same thing over and over. It walked on 2 legs. Walked like a person, but bigger. So much bigger. That's when Sheriff Thompson called them in for an emergency meeting. The conference room at the county sheriff's office smelled like burnt coffee and nervous sweat. Thompson spread photos across the table, incident reports, torn equipment, statements from shaken hikers and campers. 3 more incidents in the past week, Thompson said. He was a big guy, ex-military, not the type to spook easily. But Tyler could see tension in his jaw. Trail runner, who swears something paced him for 2 miles, staying just out of sight in the tree line. Group of college students who found their entire campsite rearranged while they slept, food supply stacked in impossible geometric patterns. And now this Williams family thing. Tyler studied the photos. The evidence was mounting, and it was all pointing to something that violated every law of nature he understood. "We've got a problem," Thompson continued. "Whatever this thing is, it's getting bolder. The attacks are escalating. Next time, somebody's going to die. So what are you asking us to do?" Madison asked. Thompson looked at Tyler. "I'm assigning a tracking team. You, because you know these mountains better than anyone. Harris, because she's the best tracker we've got. And Connor Blake. He's fresh out of the military, trained in non-lethal capture techniques. You 3 are going to find whatever's out there and deal with it." Connor Blake turned out to be built like a linebacker and quiet as a church mouse. Tyler met him that afternoon at the ranger station. The guy had maybe said 10 words total, all of them technical questions about terrain and equipment load capacity. "You really think we can catch something without knowing what it is?" Tyler asked. Connor shrugged. "Caught plenty of things in Afghanistan without knowing what they were. Trick is adapting to what you find. This isn't Afghanistan." "No," Connor agreed, "but the principles are the same. Track it. Learn its patterns. Set the trap. Execute the plan." He paused. "Course, in Afghanistan, things usually shot back. What's this thing do? Honestly? We don't know yet. Then I guess we're going to find out." They spent the first day studying the evidence, mapping incident locations, looking for patterns. The attacks clustered around a 5-mile radius in the deep wilderness, areas where cell service died, and hiking trails became suggestions rather than actual paths. "If something wanted to hide in these mountains," Madison said, staring at the map, "it picked the perfect territory." Tyler had to agree. He'd been ranging these mountains for 15 years, and even he didn't know every valley and hollow in that sector. Too remote, too dense. The kind of place that swallowed people if they weren't careful. Madison found the first real track on their second morning out. A footprint, pressed deep into the mud beside Whisper Creek. Tyler knelt beside it, pulling out his measuring tape. 17 inches long, nearly 8 inches wide. "Jesus," Madison breathed. The depth suggested something weighing at least 400 pounds, maybe more. But the stride length was what made Tyler's stomach drop. 9 feet between prints. Whatever made this track moved with legs longer than any human being. "This is fresh," Madison said, examining the edges. "Maybe 6 hours old. Look, the edges are still sharp. No debris blown in yet." Connor studied the print with the focused intensity of someone trained to assess threats. Bipedal, but the gait's all wrong for human. See how the weight distribution favors the outside edge? This thing's anatomy is different. Adapted for power, not precision. They followed the trail for 3 miles, watching the prints change as the terrain shifted. On rocky ground, only scratches and disturbed stones. In soft earth, the full outline emerged, what looked like human feet, stretched to impossible proportions. The tracks led them deeper into territory Tyler rarely patrolled. The canopy grew thick enough to block out most of the sunlight, and the silence felt unnatural. Even the birdsong seemed muted. "Anyone else notice how quiet it is?" Madison asked. Tyler had noticed. In 15 years, he'd learned to read the forest like a book. And right now, the forest was holding its breath. That's when they found the feeding site. A deer carcass hung wedged between two branches 15 feet above the ground, not caught there by accident, placed there. Deliberately, methodically stripped of meat in precise sections. Madison whistled low. "It's caching food. Like a bear would, but the placement is wrong. No bear climbs that high to hang meat." Connor examined the tree trunk. Claw marks going up. Deep grooves about 2 inches apart. Whatever climbed this has hands. Not paws. Hands with claws. Tyler felt his skin crawl. He'd seen plenty of predator behavior in these mountains. This was different. This showed planning. Intelligence. They made camp a quarter-mile downstream, far enough to avoid the smell but close enough to monitor the area. Standard protocol said they should call for backup, wait for additional rangers and wildlife specialists. But every day they delayed meant more hikers at risk. More families, like the Williams group, potentially facing something beyond their worst nightmares. The thing found them that night. Tyler's motion sensor watch vibrated at 2:15 a.m. Not the steady beep of small wildlife. The rapid pulse that meant something large was moving through their detection grid. Madison was already sitting up in her sleeping bag, eyes wide in the darkness. You hear that? The forest had gone completely silent. No insects, no night birds. Even the wind seemed to have died. In 15 years of camping in these mountains, Tyler had never experienced quiet that absolute. It felt like the entire wilderness was holding its breath. Then came the breathing. Deep, rhythmic inhalations somewhere in the darkness beyond their firelight. Too loud to be human, too controlled to be animal. Each breath lasted 5 seconds, followed by an exhale that sounded like steam escaping from a radiator. The sound moved in a slow circle around their camp, never coming closer than 30 yards, never retreating. Connor had his tranquilizer rifle assembled in seconds. Motion sensors show it's big, really big, moving at about 2 miles perfect circle, maintaining distance. This isn't random animal behavior, it's reconnaissance. The breathing continued for 20 minutes, a psychological warfare campaign that worked better than any direct attack. By the time the sound faded into the distance, all 3 of them were wired on adrenaline and the crushing certainty that they were being studied by something far more intelligent than they'd anticipated. Morning brought fresh tracks circling their campsite. The creature had walked a perfect perimeter, stopping at regular intervals. At each stop, the prints showed a different orientation. It was learning, Madison said, measuring the stride patterns. Look at these stopping points. Perfect sight lines to our tents, our equipment, the places we'd exit if we ran. This thing spent 20 minutes mapping our weaknesses. The realization hit like a physical blow. They weren't hunting an animal. They were hunting something that hunted back. They broke camp and followed the new trail deeper into the mountain interior, into territories marked on their maps as unsurveyable wilderness. The tracks led them up slopes so steep they needed climbing gear, through bramble thickets that shredded their clothing, across streams where the prints vanished and reappeared on the opposite bank with impossible precision. By afternoon, they were operating in terrain where GPS signals died, and compass readings shifted unpredictably due to mineral deposits in the rock. If we lose the trail here, Tyler said, finding our way back becomes a survival challenge. That's when Madison spotted the structure. Hidden in a grove of ancient hemlocks, camouflaged with branches and moss, stood something that defied every assumption they'd made about their quarry: a shelter. Roughly 8 feet tall and 12 feet across, constructed from deadfall timber and arranged with architectural precision. The entrance faced away from prevailing winds. Drainage channels had been dug around the perimeter. This wasn't an animal's den. This was engineering. We need to document this, Connor said, pulling out his camera. Command will never believe it without evidence. Inside the shelter, they found artifacts that shattered their remaining preconceptions. Tools fashioned from stone and bone, shaped with obvious intelligence, but designed for hands much larger than human. Baskets woven from mountain grass, filled with seeds and berries arranged by type, and bones. Lots of bones from deer and rabbits and smaller game, cleaned and sorted with obsessive care. But the most disturbing discovery waited in the back corner. A collection of human artifacts. Watches, pocket knives, pieces of clothing, all arranged in neat rows like trophies. Ashley Martinez's lens cap sat among them. Tyler picked it up, turned it over in his hands. The first concrete link between their creature and the attacks. It's been collecting from humans for a long time, Madison observed, studying the arrangement. Some of this gear is years old, faded, weathered. This thing has been watching people, taking things, learning about us for much longer than we realized. The shelter told a story that rewrote everything they thought they knew. This wasn't a mindless beast, driven by hunger or territory. This was something with culture, with technology appropriate to its environment, with a long-term interest in human behavior that had recently escalated to direct confrontation. They rigged motion cameras around the shelter and withdrew to an observation post 300 yards uphill. If the creature returned to its home base, they'd get clear footage and a chance to plan their capture approach. Then the motion sensors triggered. The creature moved through the forest like something that had never learned to fear. No stealth, no caution, just purposeful strides that covered ground with frightening efficiency. Even through binoculars, the size was shocking. Nearly 8 feet tall, shoulders broad enough to fill doorways, arms that hung past where human knees would be. Dark hair covered most of its body, but the face was visible, almost human, but stretched and exaggerated like a caricature. But the eyes were what made Tyler's blood freeze. Dark, intelligent, and focused with an intensity that spoke of complex thought processes. This wasn't an animal operating on instinct. This was a thinking being, and it was pissed. The creature examined its shelter with obvious agitation, noticing their disturbance immediately. It picked up objects they'd moved, returning them to their original positions with precise care. When it found their scent trail, it followed their path through the shelter step by step, reconstructing their entire investigation. Then it looked directly at their hiding place. The distance was 300 yards. Dense forest, careful camouflage, elevated position. By every rule of fieldcraft, they should have been invisible. But those dark eyes fixed on their location with absolute certainty, and the creature's lips pulled back in what could only be described as a smile. "We need to move," Connor whispered. "Right now." The creature picked up one of their motion cameras, studied it for several seconds, then crushed it between its hands like crumpling paper. It repeated the process with each camera, destroying their surveillance network with methodical precision. When it finished, it sat down cross-legged in front of its shelter and waited. The message was clear. It knew they were watching, it knew they were planning something, and it was ready for whatever came next. They relocated to a position 2 miles away and spent the night developing their capture strategy. Connor's military training proved invaluable, breaking down the problem into tactical components. Mobility, strength, intelligence, terrain familiarity, Connor said. "Every advantage belongs to our target, except one. We have equipment. Tranquilizers won't work reliably," he continued, sketching diagrams by flashlight. "Too many variables with an unknown species. Body weight, metabolism, adrenaline response. We could underdose and just make it angry, or overdose and kill it." Madison suggested a net system, something physical that doesn't rely on chemical intervention. "If we can funnel it into a choke point, maybe between those 2 big oaks near the creek crossing, set up a trap that triggers when it breaks the plane." Tyler knew the location, a natural bottleneck where the creek cut between 2 massive trees, creating a passage barely wide enough for something the creature's size. The plan was complex but theoretically sound. Motion sensors to detect approach. Steel cable nets designed for capturing large wildlife. backup restraints in case the primary system failed. But even as they planned, Tyler couldn't shake the memory of those intelligent eyes. The way the creature had dismantled their surveillance with such casual precision, they were preparing to capture something that had already demonstrated it could think several steps ahead of them. Morning brought the execution phase. They spent 4 hours rigging the trap, testing each component multiple times. The net system used counterweights and pulleys to create a snare that would activate when pressure plates detected significant weight on the approach path. Once triggered, steel cables would deploy from 4 directions, creating a containment perimeter too strong for even something the creature's size to break. The hard part would be driving it toward the trap. Tyler volunteered to serve as the lure, a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. The creature's shown interest in human activity, he said, particularly lone individuals. If I position myself on the far side of the trap and make enough noise, it might investigate. You'll have maybe 30 seconds once it commits to the approach, Connor warned. Soon as those motion sensors light up, you run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just cover ground as fast as possible. We'll trigger the net once you're clear. Madison handed him an emergency beacon. Anything goes wrong, you hit this button. GPS coordinates go straight to the ranger station and the sheriff's department. Tyler took position at 7 in the morning, a quarter-mile beyond the trap site. The plan called for him to create a disturbance that would seem like normal human activity. Set up a fake campsite, play music, make cooking sounds, be visible and vulnerable and attractive to something that had been studying human behavior for years. The waiting was agony. Every bird call sounded like footsteps. Every wind gust through the trees became breathing in the distance. Tyler found himself checking the time every few minutes, wondering how long normal human activity needed to attract abnormal attention. The answer was 2 hours and 17 minutes. His radio crackled with Madison's voice, barely a whisper. Motion sensors are lighting up. Big signature, moving your direction from the northwest. Range about 400 yards and closing. Tyler's heart rate doubled instantly. 400 yards meant he had maybe 3 minutes before visual contact, depending on terrain and the creature's approach speed. Copy that, he whispered back, maintaining position until visual confirmation. 3 minutes and 40 seconds later, he saw it, moving through the forest toward his fake campsite. The size was even more shocking at close range. Broad shoulders and long arms giving it a silhouette that registered as wrong on every instinctive level. But the movement was what made Tyler's throat go dry. Purposeful, coordinated, showing none of the caution wild animals displayed around human activity. It wasn't approaching his camp, it was stalking it. Visual contact confirmed, Tyler radioed. Beginning withdrawal to checkpoint Alpha. Negative. Connor's voice came back immediately. Hold position until it commits to the funnel. If you move too early, it might break off. The creature stopped 50 yards from Tyler's campsite, partially concealed behind a large pine tree. He could see its head moving as it studied the area, taking in details with obvious intelligence. It was close enough now that Tyler could hear its breathing. The same deep rhythmic sound that had circled their camp 2 nights earlier. Then it stepped into the clearing. Up close, the creature's face combined human and animal features in ways that created an instinctive revulsion response. The eyes were too large, set under a prominent brow ridge. The nose was broad and flat, but the mouth was the worst part, too wide, filled with teeth designed for tearing. It examined Tyler's abandoned campsite with systematic thoroughness, picking up objects and studying them before setting them down in different locations. When it found the pot he'd been using to make noise, it held the metal container up to the light and tapped it with one massive finger, listening to the sound. "It's investigating the camp," Tyler whispered into his radio, taking its time, studying everything. "Stay put." Madison's voice came back. "Let it get comfortable, then start your withdrawal. We need it following you." The creature spent 10 more minutes examining the fake campsite, paying particular attention to anything that carried Tyler's scent. It held his spare shirt up to its nose for several seconds, breathing deeply, memorizing his smell with predatory focus. When it finally dropped the shirt and looked in Tyler's direction, he knew it had detected his presence, those dark eyes fixed on his hiding spot, with the same certainty they'd shown at the shelter. Distance and concealment meant nothing to senses that had evolved for tracking in dense forest. It took 3 steps toward his position, then stopped and tilted its head. "It knows I'm here," Tyler whispered. Beginning withdrawal now, he started moving toward the trap site, making enough noise to maintain the creature's interest without appearing to flee. Behind him, he could hear heavy footsteps as it began following, maintaining a distance of about 30 yards. The walk to the trap site became the longest quarter-mile of Tyler's life. Every step required balancing speed with stealth, maintaining enough distance to avoid direct confrontation while ensuring he didn't lose his pursuer. The creature's footsteps provided constant reminder of its presence. Heavy impacts that seemed to shake the ground. Approaching checkpoint Alpha, Tyler radioed when the trap site came into view. "Target is maintaining pursuit pattern. Estimate 30 seconds to trigger zone." "Copy that," Connor responded. "System is armed and ready. Cross the trigger line and keep moving. We'll activate once you're clear." 20 yards from the trigger line, Tyler heard the creature's pace increase. The footsteps came faster, heavier, as if it sensed something was about to happen. 15 yards, a low growl echoed through the forest behind him. 10 yards, he broke into a run. The creature responded immediately, powerful legs launching it forward in pursuit. Tyler crossed the trigger line at full sprint, hearing the motion sensors activate with sharp electronic beeps. Behind him, the creature's footsteps pounded across the pressure plates. Trigger activated. Connor's voice exploded through the radio. "Net deployment in 3, 2, 1. The sound of steel cables under tension filled the forest as counterweights dropped and pulleys screamed. Tyler dove behind the nearest tree and spun around to see their trap in action. 4 nets converged on the space between the oak trees with mechanical precision. The creature tried to stop when it saw the nets deploying, but momentum worked against it. Steel cables closed around its massive frame, tightening automatically as the system engaged. It roared, a sound that seemed to shake leaves from the trees, but the nets held, target secured. Connor shouted over the radio, net integrity holding. Moving to Phase 2. Phase 2 involved secondary restraints. Steel shackles designed for dangerous wildlife, modified for something much larger. The creature thrashed against the nets, testing their strength with systematic precision, but the cables were rated for loads far exceeding its body weight. As they approached with the shackles, the creature stopped struggling and watched them with those intelligent eyes. No panic, no mindless rage, just calculation. Even captured, it was still learning. "Easy," Madison said. "More to them than to the creature. It's not fighting the restraints anymore. That might mean it's planning something." Connor moved forward with the first shackle, a steel manacle designed to secure the creature's wrists. As he reached through the net, the creature extended its arm, in what seemed like cooperation. For a moment, Tyler thought the capture might proceed without further incident. Then the creature grabbed Connor's wrist. The movement was faster than anything that size should have been capable of. One moment, Connor was attaching the shackle. The next, he was pulled against the net with enough force to drive the air from his lungs. The creature's grip was precise, controlling Connor's position without causing injury, demonstrating a level of restraint that spoke of intelligence and planning. "Let him go," Tyler shouted, raising his tranquilizer rifle. The creature looked at him and shook its head, a clear, deliberate gesture of refusal that left no doubt about its cognitive capabilities. It said something in a voice like rocks grinding together, sounds that might have been language in some form they couldn't understand. Then it released Connor and extended both arms toward the shackles, wrists positioned for easy attachment. The message was unmistakable. It would cooperate with the restraints, but it had wanted to demonstrate that cooperation was a choice, not submission. They secured the shackles with hands that shook from adrenaline and the psychological impact of what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't an animal they'd captured. This was a being with language, with concepts of negotiation and demonstration, with cognitive abilities that forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about intelligence in the natural world. The creature sat quietly once the restraints were in place, studying each of them with obvious interest. It spoke again. The same grinding sounds, but with different intonations that suggested attempts at communication. When they didn't respond, it pointed at itself and made a sound that might have been a name. "It's trying to tell us something," Madison whispered. "Those sounds aren't random. There's structure there, patterns. It might actually be trying to introduce itself." The implications hit like a physical blow. They hadn't captured a dangerous animal threatening hikers. They'd captured what might be the last member of an unknown species. Something intelligent enough for language and culture. Something that had been trying to coexist with human expansion into its territory until desperation drove it to more direct confrontation. The attacks on hikers might not have been predation. They might have been attempts at communication that went wrong, or territorial displays meant to discourage further human encroachment. The arranged campsites and collected artifacts might have been efforts to understand them, to learn about the new neighbors who kept invading its home. As they prepared for the long journey back to the ranger station, the creature that locals had called the Pine Ridge Terror sat quietly in its restraints, occasionally making those grinding sounds that might have been its way of trying to talk to them. It showed no aggression, no attempts to escape, just the patient resignation of something that had tried to make contact and finally succeeded, even if not in the way it had planned. Tyler stood there, looking at this being they'd captured, and felt the weight of what they'd done settling on his shoulders. The thing about catching a creature that shouldn't exist, success forces you to confront questions you never thought to ask. Questions about intelligence and communication, about territorial rights and coexistence, about what constitutes civilization and who gets to decide. As they led their captive through the mountains toward an uncertain future, Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just made first contact with something remarkable, something that had been trying to make contact with them all along. If only they'd been smart enough to listen. The hardest part wasn't the capture. The hardest part was realizing that everything they thought they knew about these mountains, about the creatures that lived here, about the nature of intelligence itself, had just fundamentally changed forever. And somewhere in those grinding sounds their captive made as they walked, Tyler thought he heard something that sounded almost like a question, as if it was asking them what came next. What happened now that two species had finally managed to meet face to face in the deep wilderness where secrets went to hide from the modern world? Tyler wished he had an answer. Hell, he wished any of them did. Tyler had been thinking the same thing. The distinction between something and someone was getting blurrier with every mile they traveled. "What choice do we have?" he asked. "Turn it loose, after everything that happened?" The Williams family, Ashley Martinez, all those other incidents, those might have been misunderstandings, Madison said quietly. "Did you see the way it grabbed Connor? It could have crushed his wrist. Instead, it held him just firmly enough to make a point. That's not animal behavior, Tyler. That's political negotiation. Political negotiation that involved terrorizing families, or desperate attempts to communicate by something that's watching its territory get overrun by a species it can't talk to." Madison paused. "What if we're the bad guys here?" Tyler didn't have an answer for that. They reached the ranger station just after sunset. Sheriff Thompson was already there, along with two state wildlife officials Tyler had never met before. The officials were both wearing suits, which seemed absurd given the situation, and they both had that federal agent look that made Tyler's instincts scream, "Jesus Christ," Thompson breathed when he saw their captive. "You actually caught it." "We caught something," Tyler corrected. "What it is, that's above my pay grade." One of the suited men, he'd introduced himself as Dr. James Crawford from the Department of Wildlife Resources, approached the creature with obvious fascination. "Remarkable. The proportions are consistent with Gigantopithecus, but the bipedal adaptation is far more advanced than any fossil evidence would suggest. The creature watched Crawford with the same careful attention it had shown everything else. "It understands us," Madison said. "Maybe not the words, but it understands we're talking about it." Crawford pulled out a tablet and began taking photos from multiple angles. "We'll need to transport it to a secure facility. Run genetic tests, behavioral studies, full medical workup." "Like hell you will," Tyler said. Everyone turned to look at him. "This isn't some specimen for your lab," he continued. "It's intelligent. It has language. It tried to negotiate with us during capture. You saw the shelter it built. That's architecture. Tool use, culture. You want to throw it in a cage and treat it like a lab rat." "Mr. Davis," Crawford said in the patient tone of someone talking to a child, "what we're looking at is potentially the most significant zoological discovery in human history. Of course, we need to study it properly." "What you're looking at is a person who can't speak English," Madison cut in. "Big difference." The second suited official, Jennifer Walsh, according to her introduction, stepped forward. "Let's all take a breath here. We understand this is an emotional situation, but we have protocols for potentially dangerous, undocumented species. For public safety. Connor spoke up for the first time in hours. Thing had a dozen chances to kill us during capture. Could have torn Tyler apart when he was playing bait. Instead, it followed him into a trap. That's not dangerous. That's curious. It attacked hikers, Thompson pointed out. "Did it?" Tyler challenged. "Or did it try to interact with them and they ran?" Ashley Martinez said she heard breathing and saw something in the trees. The Williams family had their campsite rearranged. Nobody's actually been hurt. Scared shitless, yeah, but not injured. Crawford was typing rapidly on his tablet. "Regardless of the philosophical debate, we have a situation that requires immediate action. I've already contacted a facility that can house it temporarily while we determine next steps." "Where?" Tyler demanded. "That's classified. Bullshit. This is our capture, our jurisdiction. You don't just swoop in and disappear it to some black site." "Actually," Walsh said, pulling out a document, "under the Endangered Species Protection Act and National Security Protocols, yes, we do. This animal." "Not an animal," Madison interrupted. "This entity represents both a protected species and a potential security risk. As of right now, this situation is under federal control. You and your team did excellent work, but your involvement ends here." Tyler looked at the creature. It was sitting calmly in its restraints, watching this entire argument unfold with those intelligent eyes. And in that moment, Tyler made a decision that would haunt him for years. "No," he said simply. Thompson's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" I said no. "We're not handing it over until we have guarantees about its treatment. Written guarantees. From someone higher up the chain than a couple of field agents." Crawford's professional smile vanished. "Mr. Davis, you're interfering with a federal operation. I strongly suggest you reconsider. I strongly suggest you remember that we're in the middle of the Appalachian wilderness, 12 miles from the nearest road, and you're not taking our captive anywhere without our cooperation." Tyler crossed his arms. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get someone on the phone, someone with actual authority. And they're going to explain exactly what they plan to do with this being. And then we're going to have a conversation about whether that's acceptable." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the creature made that grinding sound again. Louder this time, more insistent. Everyone froze. It was looking directly at Tyler, and slowly, deliberately, it raised one shackled hand and pointed at itself, then at Tyler, then back at itself. "Holy shit," Madison whispered. "It's trying to tell him something." The creature repeated the gesture. "Itself. Tyler. Itself, I think." Connor said slowly, "I think it's trying to say it trusts him." Crawford was filming with his tablet now, capturing every second. Incredible. "It's demonstrating complex, symbolic reasoning and selective trust formation. The cognitive implications..." "Shut up," Tyler said. not taking his eyes off the creature. He stepped closer, ignoring Walsh's protest. The creature watched him approach, then made the gesture a third time. Itself, Tyler, itself. You want me to? Tyler paused, feeling ridiculous talking to something that couldn't understand English. But those eyes said otherwise. You want me to stay with you? Is that it? The creature's expression didn't change, but something in its posture relaxed slightly. It trusts you, Madison said. Out of all of us, it's chosen you as, what? An advocate? A translator? A friend? Connor suggested quietly. Crawford was practically vibrating with excitement. This is exactly the kind of behavior we need to document. Clear preference formation, social bonding across species lines. You're not taking it, Tyler said again, more firmly this time. Not without me. Thompson stepped forward. Tyler, think about what you're saying. You can't just, I can, and I am. If this being is going to some facility, I'm going with it. Non-negotiable. Walsh's phone buzzed. She stepped away to take the call, speaking in low tones that Tyler couldn't make out. When she returned, her expression was carefully neutral. My superior wants to speak with you directly. She handed Tyler the phone. The voice on the other end was crisp, military precise, and clearly used to being obeyed. Mr. Davis, my name is Colonel Marcus Hayes. I'm with a division of the Department of Defense that handles unusual situations. I understand you're being difficult. I understand you're trying to disappear something intelligent into a black site. Tyler shot back. Sir, a brief silence. Then, surprisingly, a chuckle. You've got balls. I'll give you that. All right, let's talk. What do you want? Written guarantee that this being will be treated humanely. No invasive testing without sedation. Proper living conditions. And I want access. Regular visits to monitor its well-being. You're asking for a lot. I'm asking for basic decency. Another pause. Tyler could hear papers shuffling in the background. Here's what I can offer. We have a facility in Colorado. Think of it as a combination research station and wildlife preserve. Your capture will be housed there under observation, but not in a cage. We'll provide appropriate habitat space, food, enrichment. In exchange, our people get to study it safely, document everything, learn what we can. And my access? You can come as a consultant. We'll put you on the payroll. Monthly visits minimum, more if the situation requires. You'll report on its condition, act as liaison between our team and, well, whatever this thing is. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. I want that in writing. Before we transport it anywhere, you'll have it within the hour. And Mr. Davis, we're the good guys here. I know it might not seem like it, but we want to understand this creature, not harm it. If it's as intelligent as you claim, that changes everything about how we approach this situation. It is that intelligent, more than you know, then we'll treat it accordingly. You have my word. Tyler ended the call and looked at his team. We're taking it to Colorado. I'm going with it. Madison nodded slowly. What do you need from us? Keep investigating. The shelter we found, there might be more. If this thing is intelligent enough for architecture and tool use, it didn't learn that in isolation. There might be others. And if there are, they need to know what happened to this one. You think there's more? Thompson asked. I think something this smart doesn't develop in a vacuum. There's a population somewhere. Small, hidden, but there. And they're going to notice when one of their own disappears. Connor was already pulling out his map. The territory we covered was maybe 15 square miles, but the state forest extends for hundreds of miles. If there's a breeding population, they could be anywhere in that range. Walsh's phone buzzed again. She checked it and nodded. Transport helicopter will be here in 30 minutes. We'll have your paperwork ready by then, Mr. Davis. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Tyler gathered his personal gear, made arrangements for his supervisor to cover his shifts, and tried not to think too hard about what he was committing to. The creature watched it all with patient interest. At one point, while Tyler was close by, It made that grinding sound again, softer this time, almost questioning. "I don't know what you're asking," Tyler said quietly, "but I'm not going to let them hurt you. That's a promise." The creature tilted its head, studying him with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Then it did something that made Tyler's breath catch. It smiled, not the aggressive display they'd seen at the shelter. A real smile. Slight, almost human, and completely genuine. "Jesus," Tyler breathed. "You understand more than we think, don't you?" The helicopter arrived right on schedule, a large military transport that looked like it could carry a small house. The crew was professional and efficient, treating the creature with the same careful respect they'd show a dangerous VIP rather than a wild animal. Tyler climbed aboard with their captive, finding himself in the cargo area with Crawford, Walsh, and 2 armed guards who looked distinctly uncomfortable with the situation. As the helicopter lifted off, Tyler watched through the window as the Appalachian Mountains fell away below them. Somewhere down there, Madison and Connor were already planning their next expedition, looking for others, like the being sitting across from him. The creature was watching the window too, seeing the forest it had called home disappearing into the distance. "Sorry," Tyler said, not sure if it could hear him over the helicopter noise. "I know this wasn't what you wanted." The creature turned its attention from the window to Tyler, made that grinding sound again. Then, slowly, it extended one shackled hand toward him, not threatening, not aggressive, reaching out. After a moment's hesitation, Tyler took it. The creature's hand was enormous, warm, covered in coarse hair, but the grip was gentle, almost human. They sat like that for most of the flight, human and cryptid, connected by a simple gesture that transcended language. Crawford was filming everything, of course, making notes on his tablet with barely contained excitement. The level of trust it's showing is unprecedented. Most primates take weeks or months to form bonds with handlers. This happened in hours. "Maybe that's because I'm treating it like a person, instead of a specimen," Tyler said. "Maybe," Crawford conceded. "Or maybe its species evolved stronger social bonding mechanisms than ours. Could explain how they've remained hidden. Tight family groups, strong loyalty, sophisticated communication within their own kind. If there are family groups, they're going to come looking." "That's what I'm counting on," Crawford said. "Imagine what we could learn from a peaceful encounter with an entire population." Tyler wasn't sure peaceful was realistic, given that they'd just kidnapped one of their own. But he kept that thought to himself. The facility in Colorado was not what Tyler expected. Instead of a sterile laboratory or prison-like compound, they arrived at what looked like a large ranch, nestled in a valley of the Rocky Mountains. Multiple buildings spread across several acres, surrounded by forest that extended for miles in every direction. "Welcome to Site 17, Colonel Hayes said, meeting them on the landing pad. He was older than Tyler expected, maybe 60, with gray hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent serious time outdoors. "We handle all the weird shit the government doesn't know what to do with. Usually that means cryptids, but we've had a few other interesting cases over the years." "You've dealt with cryptids before?" Tyler asked, as they walked toward the main building. Hayes shrugged. "Depends on your definition. Most turn out to be misidentified known animals or elaborate hoaxes. But every once in a while," he glanced at their captive, "every once in a while, we get something real. And this one? This is special even by our standards." They entered a building that looked like a cross between a veterinary clinic and a comfortable home. The space they'd prepared for the creature wasn't a cage. It was more like a large studio apartment with high ceilings, comfortable furnishings, and one wall that was entirely glass, looking out onto the forest. "We figured confinement would just traumatize it," Hayes explained. "This is more of an observation suite. It can move around, interact with its environment. We monitor from the control room next door. And before you ask, yes, there are enrichment items, food options, based on what you found at its shelter, even raw materials for tool making if it wants them." Tyler had to admit, it was better than he'd feared. "You're going to remove the restraints? Once we're sure it's not going to immediately try to escape, yes. Dr. Crawford and his team will handle the initial interaction. You'll observe from the control room for now. Once it's acclimated, you can begin regular visits. They remove the shackles in stages, starting with the legs while keeping the arms secured. The creature accepted this patiently, showing no signs of aggression or panic. When they finally removed the last restraint from its wrists, it stood slowly, stretching muscles that had been confined for hours. Then it walked directly to the glass wall and placed one hand against it, staring out at the forest beyond. "It wants to go home," Madison's voice came through Tyler's phone. She'd insisted on being kept updated in real time. "Jesus, Tyler, that's heartbreaking." "I know." On the observation monitor, the creature turned from the window and began methodically exploring its new environment. It examined the furniture carefully, testing the structural integrity of a chair before sitting in it. It inspected the various tools and materials they'd provided, picking up a stone knife similar to the ones found in its shelter. "Fascinating," Crawford murmured, watching from the control room beside Tyler. "Look at how it's cataloging everything. That's not random exploration. It's taking inventory, assessing resources." The creature moved to a basket of food, fruits, vegetables, some dried meat. It selected an apple, examined it closely, then took a careful bite, chewed thoughtfully, set it aside, and tried a carrot. "It's testing everything before committing to consumption," Hayes observed. "Smart. Could indicate past experience with poisonous plants." For 3 hours, they watched as the creature explored, tested, and ultimately settled into a corner of the room that offered the best view of both the forest and the door. It sat with its back to the wall, eyes moving between the 2 points of potential danger. Military defensive positioning, Connor would later point out when Tyler described it. It's thinking tactically. Around midnight, the creature did something unexpected. It picked up one of the stone tools they'd provided and began carving on the wooden table. Not random scratches, deliberate marks that formed patterns. Are those symbols? Walshast, leaning closer to the monitor, they watched in silence as the creature carved a series of shapes into the wood. A circle, lines radiating outward from it. Smaller circles around the central one. It's a map, Tyler realized. Or a diagram. That center circle, that could be its shelter. The surrounding circles might be other locations, other shelters, or other members of its species, Crawford suggested. This could be a representation of its social group. The creature stopped carving and looked directly at the camera, like it knew they were watching and wanted them to see what it had made. "It's trying to communicate," Tyler said. "It's been trying to communicate this whole time. We just haven't been listening." Hayes was already on his phone. "I need a linguistic anthropologist and a cognitive psychologist here by morning, and someone from the paleography department at Boulder. If this thing is creating symbolic representations, we need people who can interpret them." Over the next 2 weeks, Tyler watched as an entire team of scientists descended on Site 17. Each one brought different theories about what they'd captured and what it might be trying to tell them. The symbols carved into the table became the focus of intense study. The creature added to them each day, creating an increasingly complex diagram that some researchers thought represented a family tree, others a territorial map, and a few brave souls suggested might be a cosmology or creation myth. Tyler visited every day, sometimes multiple times. The creature seemed to recognize him, showing more animation when he was present in the observation room. It would often gesture at the carvings, make those grinding sounds, clearly trying to explain something. On day 16, they made the breakthrough. Dr. Ashley Martinez, a linguistic anthropologist from Stanford, had been recording and analyzing every sound the creature made. She'd isolated patterns, repetitions, contextual uses. "It's definitely language," she announced at the morning briefing. "Not human language, but it has all the structural markers, grammar, syntax, contextual variations. And I think I've identified a few words." She played a recording. The familiar grinding sound, but isolated and repeated in different contexts. This sound, which I'm transcribing as crath for lack of a better phonetic representation, appears whenever it references itself. I believe it's how it identifies its own species, or possibly its own name. Another recording, a different grinding sound, slightly higher pitched. This one, Shannog, appears in conjunction with gestures toward the forest. I think it might mean home or territory. A third recording, and this one made Tyler sit up straight. The creature had made this sound frequently while looking at him. This one's interesting, Martinez continued. It appears to be directed specifically at Mr. Davis, I think. I think it might be trying to say friend or ally, something that indicates trust and alliance. Tyler felt something catch in his throat. So what does that mean? Hayes asked. If it's got names for things, concepts for relationships, how intelligent are we talking? Martinez chose her words carefully. Based on linguistic complexity alone, at least as intelligent as a young human child. Possibly much more. We're limited by the communication barrier. If we could understand its full language, we might be looking at intelligence comparable to adult humans. Shit, Hayes breathed. That changes everything. It did change everything. The scientists' entire approach shifted from studying an animal to attempting communication with a potentially equal intelligence. They brought in picture cards, basic sign language, anything that might bridge the communication gap. The creature learned with frightening speed. Within days, it understood basic signs for food, water, sleep, yes, and no. Within 2 weeks, it was stringing signs together into simple sentences. Food want, water please, forest see. That last one broke Tyler's heart every time. The creature asking, in its stilted way, if it could see the forest. Go back to the forest. We can't release it, Hayes said when Tyler brought up the possibility. Even if we wanted to, and I'm not saying we don't, the security implications are enormous. If there's a population of intelligent hominids living in American forests, we need to understand the situation before we go public. So it's a prisoner. It's a guest who can't leave yet. That's literally the definition of a prisoner. Hayes didn't have an argument for that. On day 23, Madison called with news. We found another shelter. 30 miles from the first one, even more sophisticated. Multiple rooms, carved wooden furniture, and Tyler, they had art. Drawings on the walls. Deer, trees, and human figures. They're observing us. More than that, some of the human figures are holding hands with the creature figures. I think these drawings are stories, histories, and some of them show humans and cryptids coexisting peacefully. Tyler looked through the observation window at the creature. It was carving again, adding to its ever-growing diagram. What if we're not the first contact? What if they've been trying to coexist with us for generations, and we're too stupid or too scared to meet them halfway? Then we've been the monsters all along, Madison said quietly. That evening, Tyler made a decision. He entered the creature's suite for the first time since they'd arrived at Site 17. The creature looked up from its carving, surprised but not alarmed. It made that sound, the one Martinez thought, meant friend or ally. Tyler pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil, sat down at the table across from the creature, started to draw. He drew the shelter where they'd found it, the circle of their observation post, the trap site, the capture. The creature watched intently as each scene took shape. When Tyler finished, it reached out and touched the drawing of itself in the trap, made a questioning sound. Tyler drew another picture, the creature in the trap, an arrow pointing to a new drawing, the creature here, at Site 17. Then Tyler drew something else, the creature at the trap, an arrow pointing to a drawing of the creature back in the forest. Free. The creature went very still. Tyler tapped the second drawing, the one showing freedom, made the sign for question that they'd taught it. The creature looked at the drawings for a long moment. Then it picked up the pencil, awkwardly, its hands not designed for human tools, and drew its own picture. The forest, multiple creature figures, a smaller version of itself among them. It had a family, or a tribe, people who were missing it. Jesus, Tyler whispered. The creature drew another picture. The forest figures approaching the trap site. But this time, the human figures in the drawing were pointing guns, and the creature figures were running. A warning or a prediction. If they held this one captive much longer, others would come looking, and that confrontation might not be peaceful. Tyler gathered up the drawings and went straight to Hayes's office, dropped them on the desk. We need to talk about releasing it. Hayes looked at the drawings. His expression grew grim. You think there'll be a rescue attempt? I think if I had family members and one of them disappeared, I'd sure as hell come looking, and I'd probably be pretty pissed when I found them. If they attacked the facility, then we just started a war with an intelligent species because we couldn't let go of one individual. Is that really the legacy you want? Hayes was quiet for a long time, studying the drawings. Finally, he sighed. I need to make some calls. A lot of people above my pay grade who want to weigh in on this. Those calls took 3 days. 3 days during which the creature became increasingly agitated, pacing the suite, carving more and more urgent symbols. 3 days during which Tyler watched something intelligent and aware gradually lose hope. On the third night, the creature stopped carving, stopped moving, just sat in its corner, staring at the forest through the glass wall. Depression, the psychological team said. It had given up. The answer came on the fourth morning. Hayes called Tyler into his office, where several other people were waiting on a video conference call. High-level types from various government agencies, all looking uncomfortable. We've made a decision, one of them said. Given the intelligence level we've documented and the potential for violent conflict, we've approved a conditional release. Tyler felt relief flood through him. Conditional how? We return it to the approximate location of capture. We monitor it remotely through GPS tracking. A small subcutaneous implant, no more invasive than microchipping a dog, and we establish formal protocols for future contact with its species. No capture without explicit authorization. Any interactions must be documented and reported. Basically, we're treating this as first contact with an intelligent non-human species. Will it agree to the tracking implant? We'll present it as an option. If it refuses, we still release it, but we lose the ability to monitor and protect. From what you've told me about its intelligence, I think it'll understand the trade-off. They presented the option to the creature using the picture communication system they'd developed. Tyler drew it out. The creature free in the forest, but with a small mark on its arm representing the implant. Then consequences. Humans finding it, but not capturing. Watching from a distance. Protecting. The creature studied the drawings for a long time. Then it touched the picture of the implant and made the sign for yes. It understood. It was willing to carry a tracker if it meant freedom and protection for its kind. The implant procedure took 20 minutes. The creature sat still through the whole thing, watching the veterinary surgeon work with obvious interest. Learning. Always learning. 3 days later, they helicoptered it back to the Appalachians. Tyler insisted on going along. He needed to see this through to the end. They landed in a clearing about 5 miles from the original capture site, far enough from human trails to provide safety, close enough to the creature's territory that it could find its way home. When they opened the helicopter door, the creature didn't immediately bolt. Instead, it turned to Tyler. Made that sound. Friend, ally. Reached out one hand. Tyler took it. Stay safe out there, okay? And if you ever want to, I don't know, meet up again or something, we'll be watching. Friendly watching, not threatening. He knew it couldn't understand the words, but tone mattered. Intent mattered. The creature squeezed his hand gently. Then it turned and walked into the forest, moving with the confidence of something returning home. They tracked it for 3 miles on the GPS. It moved directly toward the area where Madison had found the second shelter. Then, 2 hours after release, it stopped, and the GPS signal showed something remarkable. Other heat signatures approaching its location. Large heat signatures. 5 of them. Its family, its tribe, whatever you wanted to call them, they'd been waiting. The signals merged into one location. remained there for 20 minutes, then slowly dispersed, moving deeper into the wilderness, away from human territories. "They're leaving," Hayes said, watching the monitor, "taking themselves further from civilization. Can you blame them?" Tyler asked. "We kidnapped one of their own. They know we're a threat now, but they also know we let it go. That has to count for something. Maybe it did. Or maybe they were just being smart, putting distance between themselves and the creatures who had steel birds and weapons in cages." Tyler returned to his regular ranger duties, but everything was different now. The mountains felt populated in a way they hadn't before. He found himself wondering, every time he was on patrol, if he was being watched, if something intelligent was observing him from the shadows, deciding whether humans could be trusted. Madison and Connor continued documenting the shelters they found. Each one told stories of a sophisticated culture that had existed alongside humanity for who knows how long, hiding, watching, trying to understand the loud, destructive species that kept encroaching on their territory. 3 months after the release, Tyler found something at the edge of a hiking trail, a small arrangement of stones in a deliberate pattern, and carved into the largest stone, a simple drawing, a human figure and a creature figure, standing side by side, holding hands. A message, or maybe a question. Was coexistence possible? Tyler carved his own response into the stone. The same 2 figures, but with an arrow pointing toward the forest, and a sign they'd taught the creature during its captivity. "Friend." The stone disappeared overnight. 2 weeks later, a deer carcass appeared at the ranger station. Cleanly killed, expertly butchered, left at the doorway like a gift. Hayes wanted to install cameras, start a formal observation program. Tyler talked him out of it. "They're reaching out," he argued. "On their terms. If we turn it into some scientific study, we'll just prove we can't be trusted. Sometimes the best thing you can do with a miracle is just let it be." Hayes wasn't happy, but he agreed. The gifts continued. Food, mostly. Sometimes carved wooden items that Site 17's cultural anthropologists would have killed to study. Tyler accepted them gratefully, always left something in return. Tools, blankets, medical supplies, never cameras, never surveillance equipment, just gifts between neighbors. At night, sometimes, Tyler would hear that sound in the distance, the grinding vocalization he'd come to recognize as language. He never tried to record it, never tried to investigate, just acknowledged it in his head. "Hey, I hear you," and went about his business. Because here's the thing about discovering an intelligent species living hidden in your backyard. At some point, you have to decide whether you're going to respect their boundaries or destroy what makes them special by forcing them into your world. Tyler made his choice. The creature he'd captured, the one he'd called by the phonetic name Martinez had suggested, though he knew it had its own true name in its own language, was still out there. The GPS confirmed it. Moving through the mountains, living its life, checking in occasionally near human territories like it was monitoring them as much as they monitored it. A year after the release, Tyler received a call from Site 17. "You need to see this," Hayes said. They'd picked up something remarkable on the tracker. The creature had traveled nearly 100 miles north, far beyond its usual range, and at its destination, the GPS had briefly detected another signal, another tracker. "We never implanted another one," Hayes said, confused. "No," Tyler agreed. "But our friend might have. How do I put this? Maybe it explained the concept to its family. And one of them volunteered. Jesus. You think they're that advanced? I think we keep underestimating them." Every single time, 2 trackers became 3, then 5. Always voluntary, as far as they could tell. The creatures would approach the general area where they'd released the original captive, wait for a few hours, then retreat, like they were saying, "Okay, you can track us, but only the ones who agree to it." They're establishing diplomatic protocols, Martinez said during one consultation. The trackers are like ambassadors. They're the ones who interact near human territories, while the rest of the population stays hidden. It's brilliant, actually. They maintain autonomy while keeping channels of communication open. Dr. Crawford was less philosophical. We're missing an incredible research opportunity. We could learn so much. We are learning, Tyler interrupted. We're learning that intelligence comes in forms we didn't expect. That coexistence is possible if we're willing to respect boundaries. That may be the best way to study something is to leave it the hell alone and let it study us back. Crawford didn't agree, but he also didn't push it. Hayes had made the policy clear. Observation only, no interaction unless they initiated it. Any researcher who violated that policy would be removed from the project immediately. It wasn't perfect. There were still incidents. Hikers who reported seeing something, hunters who found evidence of the cryptid population and wanted to mount expeditions. Each time, Hayes's team quietly intervened, discouraged investigation, sometimes relocated the most persistent, curious humans to different areas. A cover-up? Maybe. Or maybe just giving an intelligent species the privacy they'd been fighting for. Tyler never saw his captive again. Not directly. But sometimes, on long patrols through the deep wilderness, he'd find markers, stone arrangements, carved symbols, evidence that he was in someone else's territory and they were aware of his presence. He always left markers of his own in return. Small signs that meant, I see you, I respect you. We're not enemies. Whether that would last, whether humanity could maintain that respect as more people learned the truth, that was a question for future generations. For now, in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, two species coexisted, cautiously, carefully, with mutual wariness but growing understanding. And sometimes, late at night, Tyler would stand on his porch and listen to the forest, to the sounds that most people dismissed as wind or wildlife, and he'd hear what he knew were voices, grinding, alien voices speaking in a language humans had never learned, talking about their day, telling stories, living their lives in the shadows between human knowledge and wilderness mystery. The thing about catching a creature that shouldn't exist, sometimes the real victory is letting it go and hoping you made the right choice. Tyler thought about that a lot, about the day they'd captured something remarkable and the decision that followed, about whether keeping secrets was the same as telling lies, or whether some truths were too dangerous to share. His phone buzzed. A message from Hayes. New development. Need you at Site 17 tomorrow. Bring an open mind. Tyler smiled. In this job, there was always a new development. Always another impossibility becoming reality. He sent back a simple reply. On my way. Then he looked out at the mountains. Those ancient, mysterious mountains that held secrets humans were only beginning to understand, and felt something like peace. They weren't alone out here. They'd never been alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly as it should be. Somewhere in the darkness, that grinding sound echoed across the valley. Not threatening, not fearful, just checking in. Tyler raised his hand in greeting to the empty night, knowing something was out there watching. Knowing it saw the gesture and understood. Sleep well, he said to the darkness. And from somewhere far off, so faint it might have been imagination, came a sound that might have been a response. The mountains kept their secrets that night, just like they always had, just like they always would, unless you knew how to listen.